Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience waiting in the waiting room as we took care of some last-minute technical difficulties, but we are ready to start with today's Tech Talk. If anyone needs to have Spanish translation, you can see here that we do have live interpretation. Just change the audio from English to Spanish. All right. Well, my name is Lena Ramirez. I am the coordinator for the Caribbean and Central American Botanic Garden Network based out of Naples, Florida at the Naples Botanical Garden. I'm so excited to be here with you today for our next technical talk, or Tech Talk as I like to call it. And we have two really great speakers, both from Bermuda. So before we get started, just some quick notes. Please leave yourself muted unless you are speaking at the end to ask any questions. That way we can give our undivided attention to our speakers. So let's get started. Today we have two speakers. The first is Trevor Rawson from the Bermuda Zoological Society. He is the captain of Trunk Island and its conservation manager. Trevor is a native Bermudian graduate from Ryerson University in Toronto with his bachelor's in geographic analysis and GIS. He joined the BZS, or the Bermuda Zoological Society, in 2016 as a part-time crew member on the research vessel Endurance. Trevor has a passion for understanding the local and global environment, but his main focus with BZS is the restoration of island habitats. He's now the founding committee member of the BZS Micro Forest, the conservation manager for BZS's Trunk Island Living Classroom, and captain of Callista. And then in addition, we have a second great speaker, Nick Coelho, also from the Bermuda Zoological Society, and he is the microforest officer. Nicholas is Nick is a Bermudian environmentalist whose connection to the Bermuda's ecosystem began as a junior volunteer and summer staff at the Bermuda Aquarium, Museum, and Zoo. After he earned his bachelor's in biological and psychological science from St. Mary's University in Halifax, he joined BZS to develop and lead the Micro Forest Project, which he'll be talking to us about today. This project aims to restore Bermuda's ecosystems by planting native and endemic trees and controlling invasive species. His leadership and vision has driven the success of the Micro Forest Project, demonstrating that the commitment and community support, or with this, it's possible to restore native habitats. And his efforts inspire environmental conservationists, illustrating the impact that passion in science, which we harness so much in this type of community, protects Bermuda's delicate ecosystems. So today our presentation is on reviving Bermuda's ecosystems, the Bermuda Zoological Society's Trunk Island and Micro Forest projects. And these initiatives are aimed at restoring native habitats through collaborative efforts within the community. So with that, I would love to open up the floor to Trevor, who will kick off our Tech Talk today. Trevor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lena. And on behalf of the Bermuda Zoological Society, I'd just like to say thank you to Lena and the CCABGN for having us and hosting us and giving us this opportunity to share what we've done here in Bermuda. Because there's a lot, and for a team of two, it can be quite a bit. We have a great staff here at BZS, and they all give us the best support by drawing us out into the community and making sure we're well marketed, funded, and give us the gift of Trunk Island and the microforest locations. So I just want to start by introducing myself again. So my name is Trevor, and I do a lot of the conservation work on Trunk Island, which you're seeing in front of you there. So thanks to Nick as well, who is now part of us since 2022. He's been able to help establish some of these microforest sites on Trunk Island as well as example for our kids. All right, so we can carry on. So this is one of the main reasons why we decided to take over Trunk Island. So we have 100+ Bermuda palmettos. So these are endemics to Bermuda that are located over on this corner of the island, the northwest section. So if you can press play for me, Nick, on the video. So just going to take a short walk through there so you can get a feel for what it's like inside there if the video plays for us. So it's a bit of a step back into pre-colonial Bermuda. So we obtained this island by having a willed section from the main owners of the property, and then we also purchased the section outright. So now we have not total control, but joint control of the island to restore the majority of the habitat of the 7-acre plot back to as close to pre-colonial Bermuda as possible. Dr. David Wingate, he's one of the biggest conservationists in not only Bermuda, but in the Atlantic, finished up his work at Nonsuch Island, which is never totally finished, where he created a living museum in order to support one of the rarest birds in the world, which is our national bird, the Bermuda cahal. By doing this, he realized very quickly you cannot support a seabird by putting it in a zoo. You need to create a habitat for its support, where the living museum came into play. So that is a refuge for a lot of the rarest critically endangered species of Bermuda, as well as a lot of the natives as well, being a real showcase for the world of how Bermuda's island environment is. So David Wingate then started a consulting project with us here at Bermuda Zoological Society for where you're seeing Trunk Island here. So out in the middle of the Atlantic, 500 miles at sea, I'm sure we can all testify that the Caribbean environments are isolated, but I think we might take the cake on that one. So if you can go for the next one, please, Nick. So our main goal is obviously to take out invasive species. So these species have come to Bermuda usually by humans, and they've been brought here and established themselves very well on our environment and have spread in order to push out our native and endemic species. So here on the left, you can see one of our maps, which is nice, bright vegetation, everything green. But on the right, you can actually see that our vegetation is quite brown in the center. So our native and endemic species can handle these hurricane force winds and these strong northerly gales that we get throughout the year. So they are resistant because they're adapted well to be out here in hurricane highway. So out in the center, you can see a lot of our species on the right that are very brown and very windburnt. So these are introduced invasive species. So the main ones here, we have our Suriname cherry and Brazil pepper, but we also have various other species that take over, and casuarina being one of those as well. All right. So in 2013 to 2015, we have a few achievements. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the story of how we got to where we are now. So we got rid of the casuarinas that surrounded Trunk Island. You can see one of our tree surgeons, Fiona Doe, up in the trees, volunteering her time to take down some of these very tall, in some cases, 60-foot, 70-foot casuarina trees. And, they were brought to Bermuda for a purpose. They've served that purpose as windbreak, and now it's time to take them down. So we managed to eradicate them and rats and another species away from Trunk, Rabbit, and Crow Island. So Rabbit and Crow surround Trunk Island, and anything that happens on those islands can transfer over to Trunk. So we need to start out by making sure rats specifically are off there, as we did not have rats until 1616, and they're one of the worst invasives to ever hit Bermuda, and I'm sure many other environments around the world. And then we also have this chip that you see down on the left here, which are Weekend Warrior Volunteer Force. So this is a group that was created by our volunteer coordinator to help get the community as involved as possible on Trunk Island, just on their volunteer time on the weekends. So this is still going today. Carry on. So in 2016, David Wingate spent a lot of time having a strong knowledge of his environment around Bermuda and his 80 years as being a conservationist. So in order to just pull that out of his brain and put it on paper, we hired a landscape architect to create our Trunk Island Conservation Management Plan on the 1st of June 2016. So this was very important to try and give us an approach, a way to move forward on how to tackle these invasives and how to plant native species. Callista, which is the boat that I captain as well, is up here on the right with our principal curator, Dr. Ian Walker, driving a few kids out there. It was a custom build in order to transfer a standard class in Bermuda, which is just under 30 students, out to Trunk Island in a quick 5-minute span from our Bermuda Aquarium Museum and Zoo, which is where we host a lot of our educational facility. And then we're able to bring them out there and have many, many programs which we've built upon over the years. As education and inspiring appreciation and care of island environments is our motto, is our MO, and how we're able to move forward in the future. Right. So 2017, this is when I was actually brought on to captain and take over Trunk Island. And it happened very quickly, so it was a great year for me as I was hired. And I brought with it a few skill sets. One of them was being able to identify some of the species, but also learn from a lot of the experts in the field and GPS and track a lot of the species that we were planting. You can see me here in the center, GPSing and taking some data on one of our Bermuda cedars, another endemic for our island here. And then we expanded our weekend warrior groups, usually through social media and community outreach. And when we get our corporate groups in as well, which are heavily funded, we cannot do this project without a village. It literally takes an entire country to help these projects run. And then we also were able to increase some recycling on the island. So I started a composting system where I was able to get algae from our aquarium that grows on top naturally in our reservoir, and then bring coffee grounds from businesses around Bermuda that are nice and sterile because we have strong biocontrols, biosecurity to keep certain species off of the island. All right. So in 2018, we started moving a bit faster. So now we've got an organized process, reporting system. So then we started moving quite fast. And one of the first things I really wanted to do was take out the invasives in our palmetto forest. So that fragile forest, these trees are hundreds of years old, and it withstood the test of time because most of Trunk Island was used as farming, except for that very arid, dry, rocky climate, perfect for saving the species. So that's where we brought in these different forces to put that work into action and plant as much as we could. So and then we also managed to discover that Bermuda self-seeders are now, our cedars are now self-propagating around Bermuda. We didn't realize that to this extent because the population was in the protected zone, almost in the red list for many years from the 1940s, and now we're starting to see a comeback of that species. The Chinese fan palm was our next on the list to take out. Start moving through a targeted species removal. So not just doing large block clearings because that changes the ecology a bit too quickly on such a small area. So we decided to open up holes where some species took over and plant, as you see a couple of our volunteers planting there. The now Dr. Miguel Majias in the top right-hand screen wrote his PhD on ornithology, working with the lower bird in the center there, which is our only endemic finch, the chick of the Ville or the white-eyed vireo. So he spent his time doing recordings and using Trunk Island to help band the white-eyed vireo, as well as take recordings to find out that they actually have different dialogue across different islands in Bermuda. So that's very interesting, and he's just made it to doctor this past year. So good for him. All right. So in 2019, we started introducing other species, bringing the fauna back to Trunk Island. So there you see some of our science club, which is brought on by the Bermuda Zoological Society to get kids to do an extracurricular activity that is other than major sports and things like that. Because there are kids that are just purely interested in the science. So we brought out the first release of the critically endangered Bermuda land snail, or Poecilizonites, to which it was only rediscovered in 2009 after going extinct for about 13 years, or thought extinct, I should say. They were surviving on a moss pocket in the middle of Hamilton, which is our capital in Bermuda, underneath the air-conditioned duct. They were all sent to the Chester Zoo, in which we have a breeding program now, which is now topped to be one of the largest single species releases in the world at 800,000 species. They just crossed 800,000 individual releases in Bermuda. And we now have quite a few on Trunk Island, but here are the kids releasing the first few. We also have, we undergrounded our power lines to help with our bird life that were out there. And we also had the Ocean Trek series film a feature on Trunk Island, installing some of our long-tail burrows. And then we also have a MODIS antenna, which some of you may know is a bird tracking antenna from that we have dots all around the world with these antennas to track migratory birds. And now, so far, we've had one hit on that, and that one hit was a red knot from the Arctic on its 9,000-mile migration journey from the Arctic down into even Argentina and back up to the Arctic again. So it was a really good feat to have that hit. All right. So in 2020, I think it was a slow year for everybody, right? So we slowed down a bit, but it allowed us to work a little bit on bringing a few people out to the island. So before COVID actually hit, we had some archaeologists come out and check out a few things on the island. So you can see Dr. Michael Jarvis from the University of Rochester there in the hole. So we're going through to try and track if there are any, if there's any significance that has also been discovered on one of our maps. And so far, we have found one location of note. You can see the archaeologists there working away. That's a team from the University of Rochester, all students, master's students. And we discovered a 1663 site in which we're now working actively to clear and find out what did they do on Trunk Island, other than grow 75 pounds of tobacco, which was the original currency. So in 2021, then we started moving fast again. So I'll try to go quickly through this slide because there was a lot going on in 2021. You have a rock wall built there, which will be perfect for blockading that bay, which you'll see in a little bit. We cleared an area in preparation for our pond. The Chester Zoo now bringing snails to us from England. They also raise another critically endangered species called the Bermuda skink, which is 1.4 million years unchanged as a species, but now only down to the last 1,200 individuals in the wild. So they raised them up and brought them over to Trunk Island with a master's student, and were able to release 19 out there successfully. And now we're actually about to bring our next 18 this year. David Wingate, spotted here, he's got quite a big smile on because that species he's pointing at is the Bermuda sedge. It is one of Bermuda's rarest species. It's no longer found in the wild. So these were brought to Trunk Island to plant. And this is the first year we actually got to find self-seeding on Trunk Island. So there are only two places in the entire world that self-seeds. One is on Nonsuch Island, David's Living Museum, and ours is on the Living Classroom of Trunk Island. And we also have 6 land hermit crabs released, which only have about 600 left in the wild. So we're trying to increase their native range on Trunk Island. Next, please. So in 2022, another fast moving year. So here you can see some of the skinks from the Chester Zoo as they're coming out. So that's that little lizard in the center. We have the beginning of our pond being dug up there in the top left-hand corner. And you can see Nick, I'm sure it was a good year for him as well, because that was the year that we brought him on full time here at BZS. And he's working to actually track the skinks because they came with a little monitor on them. We were able to track for about 2 weeks and find their spread, a brand new study done with that species. And then if you see on that little screen where the snail is, right on top of it is a little tiny baby snail. So it just so happened that coincided with the Chester Zoo visiting to release these skinks. I would not have spotted that baby snail. And then we have our first red mangrove planting, as you can see with Aspen Re, our main funder of that project, down at the bottom, and a couple of our interns doing water quality testing to find out the differences over time, and then the planting itself in these burlap sacks where we're utilizing the soil from the pond on the top left to fill in the bags and put inside this area here. In the first 2 weeks, we had a seahorse come in, juvenile shrimp, juvenile fish using the area. So I think it was already starting off good. Next, please. So 2023, so we had more releases of the Bermuda land snail, but a lesser, so a new species of Bermuda land snail. So you can see Gerardo Garcia of the Chester Zoo, who is head of raising a lot of species worldwide in the Chester Zoo, not just the snails and skinks, but everything up to Komodo dragons and various other species around the world. So he was able to come back, and we did a filming with CNN's Call to Earth to highlight the successes of that project thus far. You can see our secondary mangrove site up in the top right-hand corner where we're planting there. And you can see Philippe, who will be our new president of Bermuda Zoological Society as of this year, standing with his Weekend Warrior shirt, observing the first 150 planted over there on the island on that side. And then we also have the pond, which Nick will go on to a little bit further, which we're now turned into a proper pond about 9 feet deep. And you can see myself down at the bottom in what I've now dubbed as a self-watering mangrove nursery. As you can see, it's doing quite well. We started out with, to open up the large pond, and then we ended up making a solid rock flat, in which was in the high and low tide range, perfect for raising red mangroves. So you can see it's quite successful, and we've raised about 1,500 to date. Next, please. So just a couple of numbers for you. So our volunteers up to when these numbers were taken was about 856 across those years, giving about 6,400 hours across those years of various different tasks, from taking down Chinese fan palm with David Wingate there to kids planting cedars, as well as chipping a lot of the things there and tending to our facilities. So it's a very, very busy island. David Wingate has now dubbed us nonsuch on steroids. So that is his main line for us. All right, next please, Nick. So just to give you an overview of where we are today. So over 1,500, I think we're actually almost past 2,000 now as of the last 2 months. Native and endemic trees and shrubs and other species planted out there. 50, so you can press play for me, Nick, there as well. So 50 plus longtails nesting around Trunk and Rabbit Island. So that number seems to be going up every year because we keep adding longtail burrows around the island with our conservation camp. You can see a small chick-of-the-villy or white-eyed vireo nesting in the very center there, as well as a bluebird out there, which we had 11 chicks last year. And then you can see a little longtail coming up inside this hole as well, where we're able to drive right up to on the boat to show kids that we're monitoring these birds. We're pulling them out of the hole. You can see a little chick underneath the wing there too. So we're pulling them out of the hole. They're getting docile with us. We're banding them, measuring them, and having a whole procedure of monitoring these species to learn more about them every year. And we have 7,000 snails released now as of the very, very recent number. And then another 19 skinks are going to be reintroduced this year. So very, very busy island. So thank you for learning a little bit about Trunk Island. And this is basically my office that you're seeing there from the video. So that is Trunk right ahead of you there, and the 2 cottages right in front. That is kind of where I make my living, my career. I'm going to hand it over to Nick now because he's just got just as much information, if not more, in the short period of time he's been with us at BZS. So thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone. Once again, my name is Nick Coelho. I am the head of the BZS Micro Forest Project. This project was started in 2001. On the left-hand side here, we have a small little time lapse of November 2021, our first ever plot, Jennings Road in Flats, just across the way from our facility. And the Micro Forest basically came about from a internal sponsor who wanted to do some reforestation around Bermuda. And it's fully aligned with UN sustainability and biodiversity protection and enhancement principles. So drawing on David Wingate again, he is the father of Atlantic conservation. He is our first ever government conservation officer of Bermuda. He had a quote back in the day that said, using 3 houses per acre as a benchmark, if every household planted 1/3 of its property with natives and endemics, 1/3 of Bermuda would be planted and populated with sustainable trees, shrubs, and bushes. So what is a microforest? Microforest in a gist is it's a project that was developed to reduce Bermuda's carbon footprint. And we do this by planting dense, diverse forests consisting of natives and endemic flora in multiple locations across the island. It was inspired by 3 important points. The first point is that the success of the Milwaukee Forest model spanning multiple countries. It has showed the world how to create these microforests that benefit the local communities, the local wildlife, and lowering the carbon footprint of these communities by creating these carbon sinks. Carbon sinks in terms of microforests are described as a diverse habitat of native plant life that will remove carbon from the atmosphere and store it in the foliage, roots, and limbs. Selecting areas in which these microforests will be preserved allows these chosen plots of land to continually remove and store carbon as the unit grows and matures. As a byproduct of photosynthesis, the plants use this process to remove the carbon from the atmosphere, and oxygen is emitted in its place, thus in turn reversing the greenhouse effect. Next, the collaboration of public-private partnership is the basis of the project and is invaluable to the growth of this project. Just like everywhere across the globe, the Bermuda Zoological Society has onboarded with our first ever sponsor, Renaissance Re, and the Department of Parks, who came and funded the development of the BZS Micro Forest Project initially. These projects require a joint effort to become sustainable and to actually move forward and to see our vision of Bermuda flourish with native and endemic flora. So without these generous organizations and individuals, this project and its conception would not be possible. Lastly, the ever-growing problem of invasive species and the pressure of invasive species on our fragile and unique Bermuda environment has definitely had a very, very strong impact. Since the 1940s, we had a scale-bug insect that removed a majority of our endemic Bermuda cedar. And that in turn has allowed these invasives over the previous 80 years or so to dominate our Bermuda landscape. Our Bermuda landscape has completely changed to become dominated by these foreign species. And in turn, these species spread more seeds in our habitat, leading to faster growing populations, not dissimilar to a virus. They also grow at rates that our local flora cannot compete with. And this causes a crowding out effect and then the inevitable choking out of our very important species. So by clearing these sections of invasive land that is dominated by these invasive species and then replacing them with a diverse mix of native and endemic plants, we not only create a dense forest of local plant life, but also contribute to the spread of seeds from Bermuda's very iconic and rare species. So a little bit about the Miyawaki method. Miyawaki method was developed by a Japanese botanist in Japan. And this process is basically planting natives and endemics in a higher density rate and everything all at once. This is 100 times more biodiverse than traditional conservation methods. The growth rate is almost 10 times more. It's 30 times denser, and the goal is to be 100% organic. So what are some of the benefits of a microforest? So as I said before, it not only acts as a carbon sink, but it also acts as a huge refuge for native and endemic plants, insects, and birds. Then this refuge then allows the diverse species to then flourish and then are further displaced either by bird activity or seed dispersal. And then these native plants end up dropping the debris that slowly alters the soil composition. So when we had that scale bug insect that wiped out our Bermuda cedar, we brought over a species called casuarina, or Australian whispering she pine. And this was very beneficial for the first few 20 years. We had a nice windbreak to prevent it from hurricanes, but the problem with this specific species is that the roots are more shallow, and us being on a limestone island with a very thin layer of soil, there wasn't enough soil for these roots to grab into. So when we had a hurricane, oftentimes these trees would topple over. But to couple with the fact that their needles and their leaves are actually acidic, so when they drop their needles, anything around them in a 20-foot radius is completely decimated and killed off. So kind of altering the soil slowly by our native plants dropping their debris is really beneficial. And finally, it also reduces heat by absorbing water, light, and stops heat radiation from being emitted back into the environment. So a little bit about why we chose this method and why we kind of developed the BZS Micro Forest Project. It is our first ever local project of this size, to help mitigate the climate change by capturing and storing atmospheric carbon through photosynthesis. It is fully aligned with the UN principles of sustainability and biodiversity. and it is also conveniently aligned with the conservation strategy for the Caribbean region. It also is tied into other global carbon offsets, such as Trillion Trees Organization, and it helps to highlight the importance of collaboration locally and globally. So the microforest initially had a goal of 4,500 plants planted over 3 years, with 30 sites completed and over 9,000 seedlings raised. Some of our restoration sites that we really wanted to target were school grounds in particular, public parks that were severely underutilized or filled with invasives that they didn't really have the ability or the capacity to take out themselves, and various public spaces such as roadside verges is a big example, and sections of the Bermuda Railway Trail. This is just a map of Bermuda, which showcases our 20 current microforest sites. Since November 2021, we have over 45,000 square feet, and another 10 sites for this year will be shortly completed. So how do we design some of these microforests? So as I talked about the casuarina a little bit earlier, we have picked a designated area. This is our second ever plot. This is Warwick Park. So we had a designated area that was severely underutilized, didn't really offer anything to the park. So we proposed to our park planner, Jessica, that we could utilize the space for betterment of our environment. So what we do is we initially find an area that needs some restoration. We fly our drone, do some drone imagery. Then I'm the one who designs the actual forest. Trevor helps out with his GIS degree and helps us do actual maps and stuff. But this is just a quick example of how we design some of these forests. So I'd really like to talk about our first ever plot, Jennings Road. We had a quick time lapse in the beginning. It started in November 2021 to try to find an area that we needed to restore. So what better way to restore an area than directly across from our facility, directly across the railway trail that connected these two bridges at one point. So this is Jennings Road. It is approximately just under 115 square meters. This is the plan that we had tentatively developed. The problem being that we want some of these species, but they are particularly rare. Before this project came about, there was not really drive or interest in growing some of these plants, except the big major three. So the big major three for Bermudians are the Bermuda olivewood, the Bermuda cedar, and the Bermuda palmetto. Some of these other species were very rare up until quite recently, where we have a bunch of nurseries now trying to grow some of these plants out. So this is the view of what the plot looked like. It was full of invasive grasses, particularly cane grass, grass that grows really quick, really fast, and chokes out a lot of our native and endemics. On the left-hand side, this was an existing stand of natives and endemics that were planted in the 80s, I believe. So we kind of wanted to bolster what was existing there with something newer in front. This is just an aerial view of the same plots. And this is directly after clearing in November 2021. All the grass was completely removed, and unfortunately, it has to be done by hand. You have to get all the root mass out, otherwise it'll just continue to grow. This is an aerial image just after it was planted, and most of these were staked. They were just under a foot in height, and this is after we had spread the soil to kind of create that soil structure and composition. This one was in February of 2022. This is in this is in May of 2022. This is an aerial shot of May. So we see some significant growth in those first few months. This will be August 2022. So we have seen a little bit of invasive grass. You know, some of this cane grass is coming up right here in front of the sign. So the goal of this microforest is within 3 years, we're trying to get them to become self-sustainable. So as we go through, we will kind of see this happening. So as you can see, some of this understory and ground cover is popping back up. So we go in, remove some of the invasive stuffs while keeping some of the natives such as Bermudiana or Joseph coat as well. This is just a little bit further in November 2022. So this is a year after it had been planted up. This is another aerial shot. So we have seen some significant growth in our Jamaican dogwoods in front, act as a nice wind buffer and wind break from our oncoming winds, which typically come through this way. This was in last summer. Last summer, we had a record amount of rain. We had almost 72 inches of rain, our second wettest in all of Bermuda's history. So this has also contributed to a very, very significant growth rate in our plants. And as we could see here, some of these Jamaican dogwoods have amazingly filled out some of these gaps. And this will be in November 2023. So we've seen huge amounts of growth in not only the front line, but all the surrounding areas as well. So this is a quick little video to kind of show you that significant growth rate that we've had since this last summer's rain. All right. So that's another image from last year, November. So this is 2 years of growth on this plot so far. So a big proponent of the Bermuda Zoological Society is education. So not only educating, but educating our school kids and educating adults alike. So with that, we have developed a bunch of curriculum to kind of help us and help the students out and to kind of inspire conservation and conservation methods. It can be quite difficult and time consuming sometimes to measure variations between different time changes. So the emergence of non-destructive evaluation methods has been really beneficial for us. That drone imagery, as I showed you earlier, are a really good tool to kind of use in the field to see and provide data in measurements within minutes. And now with this new artificial intelligence boom, there's an application for field estimates now. The artificial intelligence also has a subdivision called machine learning, and it's a method of data analysis that automates analytical model building. It's based on a model that systems can learn from data and identify patterns and make decisions with very minimal human intervention. So in our top left, we have Trunk Island that's being mapped by the drone. All these little boxes right here are actual drone images. So I'll talk a little bit about how and why we kind of use these conservation measurements. So we recently have purchased a multispectral drone, and this allows us to better analyze some of our areas. So I'll be talking about Trunk Island as a good example. Here is an orthomosaic picture, so a picture that's stitched up of almost 1,000 other images of the drone, so meshed all together to kind of create this blend. So that is RGB data. And with these non-destructive evaluation methods, we're actually able to see plant health. So this is a method called VARI, so visibly atmospherically resistant index. This allows us to work with RGB data or regular picture data to kind of see how green an image is. It's a measurement of how green it is. It sees the reflectance of vegetation versus soil. It's a good, quick, easy measurement, but with our new multispectral drone, we're actually able to delve a little bit deeper. This next image is using red, infrared, and red edge pictures, and the algorithm is called NDVI, or Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. It is a way to measure how healthy and green vegetation is over a wide range of conditions, and we kind of can compare this model to our next one right here. Sorry. So this one right here is actually called Optimized Soil Adjusted Vegetation Index. And this allows us a better version of how to identify emergent deficiencies in our plants that we have planted and to see problematic areas in addition to also invasive species. There's more variation in this model, and it works well to see how sensitive some of this vegetation is. And it works in an area that is densely canopied over a wide spectrum of vegetation. So this is very good for identifying invasives as well. So as I talked about machine learning and kind of creating this artificial intelligence of how can we use this for conservation purposes. So as a quick example, this is a still image of Trunk Island. This is in the palmetto forest. And what we do is we take these still images, we upload it to a site, and in that site, I go in, I annotate, or I create a boundary box around some of these plants. I tag it with a tag that states what it is. So for instance, these ones right here are Bermuda palmettos, are endemic palm. And then over time, we're able to feed with multiple images, talking about almost 500 to 1,000 is the bare minimum. You feed it into a neural network, and this neural network is able to output a percent confidence interval. So this is an image I did quite recently. Yesterday, we did our first neural network. Some of the darker areas are the ones that a machine learning algorithm has identified by itself. The lighter ones are the ones that I have identified, but the solid ones, as you can see, it looks like quite a mess, but this is the one that the machine has identified. And with that, it gives us a percent confidence interval. So then we're able to spend less time annotating, run it through an algorithm, and actually see our invasives that we have over time without actually being there and having boots on the ground. With this, we also are able, with our drones, we're able to create three-dimensional models. So we're able to go into classrooms and kind of teach kids the importance of why we need these drones, why we need to use it as a conservation tool, and some of the methodologies of how it is useful. So for instance, we're actually able to do 3D imagery of a plot. For instance, this is Jennings. We're able to see the growth rate over time using these elevation gains. So we're actually able to see the pressures, the heights. So this is November 2023 versus 2022. So we could actually compare quite easily the growth of these forests as well. I want to quickly talk about a really good opportunity that the BZS and the Micro Forest Project had last year. We were approached by our park representative, Jessica Carvalho, in regards to creating a coronation garden for King Charles. So part of the microforest MO is to use underutilized spaces or brownfield sites as well, and underutilized parks. So in the botanical gardens, this was actually an old derelict workshop. We had a hurricane that blew the roof off and unfortunately was never repaired. It became into disarray. So this is a perfect site to actually transform, remove the building, remove all the invasives surrounding it. Department of Parks was a good collaborator in this. They helped us remove the building, all the debris, all the conduit and stuff, and made sure that there were no electrical wires that we could, hit in the event of using our Maddox. So they cleared the site off for us originally. We were in contact with our park representative to kind of converse and work through this planting plan with them in conjunction with them. Part of the stipulation was that they would have liked a sit-off area, so like a picnic area that the public can utilize, but it had to be visible from this roadside here. It had to be visible at all points. So when we created our pathways, we kept this in mind. This is a little bit more formal planting than we typically do. Nature doesn't really have straight lines. However, we kind of adapted a little bit, and our style for this is slightly a bit different. It's not as randomized as our traditional microforest methods. So just a quick, easy example, we went from a brownfield site to now this is just a month over on the planting. This is May 2023. This would be November 2023. This is after a fresh load of chippings. So the Department of Parks was felling a casuarina that it came down in a wind. So what better opportunity to use that invasive species as wood chippings, putting that carbon back down into the environment to then further help the development of the microforest. This is just another side view. And this was in April of 2024, so just a couple months ago. And I have a little video here. So this kind of shows the significant growth rate that we've seen in the last, just in the last year. This is one of our shining examples of how a microforest could ultimately grow really, really fast and provide a lot of biodiversity to the surrounding environment. Some of these trees were planted at just 4 inches, and within a year, they're about 2 feet round and 3 feet high. So it's really, really eye-opening to see. In the front here, you'll notice a bunch of color. These are not natives endemics. These are planted solely in the fact that we are in the botanical gardens. We do need to have some pop of color, pop of vibrancy, but it also provides our pollinators a way to kind of eat and thrive before our natives endemics flowers start to come out now. So growing for the future, right? We know what we have on the market are big three: our Bermuda cedar, our Bermuda palmetto, and our Bermuda olive wood. However, our whole limiting reagent, if we go back to chemistry, our whole limiting factor in this whole equation of our project is plants. If we don't have the plants to plant, we can't plant anything. We can't further our goals. So when I came on full-time, my ultimate MO was to try to create a nursery that we could start to grow some of these rare natives and endemics that are not typically offered on the public market. This is a 3D mock-up using a company called Foreflex, and using some of these automated drip irrigation and horticultural tables. So as we saw in Trevor's presentation, right here is where the archaeologist dug, and just behind it was where we had started some of our nursery endeavors. This will be our second version of the nursery. It started off very small with Trevor when he started. And then when we came around, we wanted to kind of create something that was beneficial for the Trunk Island project and the Microforest project. So in 2023 of February, we started to fell our invasive fiddlewood. It's good firewood. We actually have a pizza oven on Trunk Island where we teach the kids how to throw some pizzas as well. So we took it upon ourselves to clear cut this area of land that we deemed as our nursery. Our biggest tree that we felled was 103 feet, measured through the drone. But we're not burning this material, right? We want to kind of put this carbon back down into the environment. Right here is our white swan of Trunk Island, our good old chipper. So spent a few days chipping. As you can see, some of these trees are quite huge for the area that they were in. And this is it after all said and done. We have our 3 nursery tables now with room for more expansion right here for another 3. So this is what it looked like after planting. We have the ability to plant 764 one-gallon pots in close proximity with each other on all 3 tables. And this is it after we had just planted up some of our newly collected seed last year. So we also have this terraced area. So as we start to move some of these 1-gallon pots into 3 and 5 gallons, we're able to put them out to kind of harden them off and become ready to become self-sustainable in their environment. Here we have the Bermuda Botanical Society, who joined us in November to help plant some of our natives and endemics. As you can see, right here would be one tray of, it was buttonwood cuttings. In the back, we had a whole tray of turkey, berry, and Jamaican dogwood seedlings. In the front, we have some red mangroves and some of our rare species, such as the yellowwood, and some cuttings of Bermuda cedar. So not only are we growing terrestrial plants, as Trevor had mentioned, we have a black mangrove pond now, and on that pond, we have developed a flat area for self-watering of our red mangroves. So this is just a little timeline of how this area was developed. This was our secondary nursery, and this allows us to grow at least 2,000 seedlings per year of red mangroves and black mangroves. So when we had initially discussed having this pond, we were trying to kind of create a kidney bean shape. We were working with the environment and working with what was existing there already. after we had removed all the invasives off the land. We had a test dig about a foot around the perimeter and a bucket worth, so about 3 feet down in the middle, to see over time what would we get with this intertidal zone that we have here. Bermuda is built, as I said, on a limestone rock, so it's very porous. It allows this water to flow freely through the limestone. Here we can see the delineation of the start of the pond. Our goal was to dig a trench around the pond to allow the slippage over time to kind of be caught before it becomes a mud flat. So we dug down 3 feet on the perimeter and then slowly tapered it off to about 9 feet in the center of the pond here. This is it after just being freshly dug. The side here was all filled in with any of the invasive debris that we had removed around the outside, particularly cherry, kind of a nature's rebar is what I want to say. We kind of use it as nature's rebar. And here we go, just a year after planting the initial start of our red mangroves here in our pots. And this was it last summer. I had went away for 2 weeks and we had that torrential amount of rain. And I came back and some of these red mangroves have grown almost 2 to 3 inches. So it was really mind-blowing to see how well this nursery had done in such a short period of time. So this is a quick comparison of that growth that I had seen. So to go back to the micro forest plots, our first ever plot was Jennings, which we talked about earlier. In year 1, we had almost over 20,000 square feet of land planted up. And in year 2 combined, year 2 was 32,000, but combined it was almost 53,000 square feet of land. So some of the plant distribution that we have over 42 species that we planted out. As you can see, I kind of went overboard the last year or so. Kind of exceeded our goal for 3 years and then 2 years. But we have a 95% success rate so far. In traditional planting and conservation, this success rate is about 53 to 58%. So seeing it at 95% is absolutely mind-blowing. All this work would not be possible without our dedicated team of volunteers, school kids, our educators, our partners in crime, our corporate volunteers, all make this possible. So let me just pull up the numbers, sorry. We have had almost 3,000 volunteers, 3,000 hours of volunteership, just non-corporates, since the project's inception. We have recently had 2,895 hours of corporate volunteership with over 609 individuals that we have worked with. So these are some of the pictures of our interns and our corporate volunteers. It would not be possible without our major donors as well. But the big number, right? We're removing all these invasive plants. How do we see and visualize this data? So a running total of estimated 85,000 invasives have been pulled out. This is plus or minus about 5,000. We don't measure each individual grass leaflet, but we do a rough estimate. So some of our top invasive species that we have culled, our number 1 is Brazil or Mexican pepper. Number 2 is our fiddlewood. Number 3 is our invasive Chinese fan palm. 4 is the cane grass. 5 is the asparagus fern. And number 6 is the wireweed. Some of the achievements to date, we were awarded a Darwin Plus local grant from the UK government last year. We got 50,000, and with that, we were able to grow 3,000 seedlings and to provide another 6 additional plots last year. We won Best of Bermuda 2023 award for the Booster of the Environment. We were nominated 2 times for the Steward of Sustainability in our drone program called Drone Deploy in 2022 and 2023. And last year, we were published in the Naples Botanical Gardens magazine labeled Conserve. So once again, this would not be possible Trunk Island and the Mike Forest without our outreach and our volunteership. Honestly, engaging in the community and the public, whether it be students and private schools, youth clubs, homeowners, the Parks Department, companies and employees, and members of environmental groups would not be possible without them. Our driving force is the volunteership to get some of these things done. So thank you for your time. These are a list of our sponsors. HSBC is our lead partner now. Renaissance Re is our founding partner. We have the logo from UK Aid and Darwin Plus, Aspen, Convex, UBP, HVAC Shack, Vantage, Chubb, ELIS, Convex, End-to-End, and lastly, the Department of Parks. We would not be able to do this project without the Department of Parks. We are utilizing public land, and without this land, these projects would not be possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Trevor and Nick, for a great presentation. I know that we're running a little bit close to time here. So if you are unable to stick around past the next 2 minutes, your time, or noon EST, I completely understand. Please feel free to hop off. But if you can stick around, I would love to open up the floor for anyone that has questions. Please feel free to unmute. If there are no questions, I have some as well, but I'll first open it up to everybody else. Oh, Sarah, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you, Lena. So I'm Sarah, and I work at the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew in the UK as the Conservation Partnership for the UK Overseas Territories. And I have to say, it's so inspiring to hear about your work. It's fantastic. I want to go to Bermuda and see this amazing work. So thank you very much, Trevor and Nick. It's been fantastic. So I have two questions, if that's okay. First, I think I kind of guess the answer, but I would like to know what's the reaction from the general public to all of these initiatives. If they receive these, you know, when you plant along the roads, if people are interested on these projects, and if they start asking you for plants for their own garden, by seeing the advantage of planting native species. And second, my question is, it's fantastic to see how you're scaling up these nurseries. How do you source material for these nurseries? Is it from wild populations? Do you collect seeds, or you're just doing seedlings propagation? You're just doing cutting. So, thank you.
All right, so I'll take that. So the general public it's a mixed bag. For the most part, it is pretty positive. But we do have the odd occasional complaint that some of these microforests aren't a manicured garden. We've never sold it as a manicured garden, right? The way that I like to say it is Bermudians have amnesia. Going from cane grass dominated invasive species to having a whole variety of natives endemics, they kind of single out the invasives, being like, oh, well, it's not weeded. We've never sold it as to be a well-maintained manicured garden. So kind of getting that message out has been a little bit tricky sometimes, but after we explain it to them, it's like, oh, yeah, I get that. Like, we don't go to a forest in the United States or in Canada or the UK and start pulling weeds, right? So kind of have to retrain the frame of thought. But for the general public, it has been really receptive. We've had a lot of private homeowners and businesses want to kind of create some of these microforests on some of their land. So we have been developing the last few years a way that we could branch out, if you will, to kind of show how these organizations or private landowners could do it. We are going to be releasing a document of how to do it and the methodology of it. But we also offer consulting as well. But in general, it has been really receptive. Our nurseries, like public nurseries on the mainland, have really had a huge increase in demand of some of these native endemics. So not just the big three, like I said, not the cedars, the palmettos, and olive-woods, but some of these more rare species. So we've also been working with them to kind of source some of these genetics. We personally go out and select some of our genetics from across the whole mainland, and additionally on Nonsuch, when we're given the opportunity to go there to get some of their seeds or seedlings. So we're not bottlenecking ourselves by just keeping it and hoarding it all. We kind of want to give it to the public, right? The more that we can encourage the public and the broader sense of Bermuda to plant some of these, it's going to be a win-win for everyone, right? I think I answered your question. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Very inspiring.
Thank you for your kind words, Sarah. And just to tag on one thing to what Nick was saying about nurseries, we do get gifts from people as well. So we have to think about where to plant those things. But one of the big ones is sometimes nurseries disband, sometimes charities disband. So what do you do with their species? So we did go into one of the charities, Save Open Spaces, or SOS. And they, unfortunately, one of the gentlemen that was taking care of it got sick, and a lot of his plants started to go to ruin. So I went in there as quick as I could and got as many as I could. Many were bone dry. Luckily, Bermuda species can handle that very well. And I was able to rescue, I think, 42 yellowwoods, which is one of our rare species that we have here, of which they're now thriving on trunk.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Sada, for your great questions. Do we have any others? Oh, Colin, please feel free.
Thanks, Lena. Nick, Trevor, thank you for two brilliant presentations. Some of the data that you've been quoting there are really, really very impressive. I think, absolutely amazing success rates and range of species that you've managed to get into cultivation and then get out there. We could spell, I've got 101 questions, but just one interesting one. One statistic that came out, this idea of being self-sustaining within 3 years is really quite an ambitious target. Sounds like you're kind of getting there as well. How is that working? And are you seeing much, re-establishment from invasives from the soil seed bank? I mean, is that an issue in terms of competition? Because the invasives obviously have been there a long time. There's going to be a soil seed bank. How's that panning out? Both actually, I think on trunk, which I think is particularly interesting, but also on your local microforests.
So I'll just take the beginning of that one, and I'll let Nick talk about the microforest specifically. But on Trunk Island, we don't have the access to as much soil and compost, like public compost, as you would, because we have our biosecurities. So on Trunk, we do our best to just continuously maintain, but I also use shade as a huge helper. The plants need the sun, obviously, to grow. So if you can limit how much sun they get, then you get less invasive regrowth. We do actually have 2 sites on Trunk Island, and now a third comparison with the microforest. We have 10 by 10 meter botanical quadrats. 2, one at a low-lying, one at an upland area, to study the invasive pressures over time, as well as to find out how to better maintain reoccurring species, especially Brazil pepper. To give you a very quick statistic, we started one 10 by 10 plot with 1,500 Brazil pepper. We measured every piece of biomass we could, lengths, heights, distancing from each other, and so on. Cleared that off, and then in the next year, you see the succession, right? So you take off anything that's non-native and allow the natives to grow. The second succession of Brazil pepper was about 55,000 seedlings. Measured them all, and so on. Third year, they start to dwindle, and now we're on our 6th year of doing that particular plot. There are 3 on there.
Oh.
So that gives you an idea that you can do it just by removing them slowly. 55,000 is a very, very slow number to remove.
Very number.
But you get volunteers to do it, you get kids to do it. They can target those species and identify them at that level as well as a large level. And I have parents coming back saying, hey, can you teach them another species as well? I have all these other species on my property. Can you help get rid of them? But I'll let Nick talk about the microforest as well. Thank you, Colin.
For the microforest specifically, using Jennings as an example, a lot of the regrowth has been on the surrounding edges. So areas where you have the main plant, but you have a little bit of a gap for sunlight to actually reach them. It's just a matter of going in and physically removing them, as Trevor said. We did find the first year was a lot of invasive regrowth, whether it be Brazil pepper or cane grass, but kind of being on top of it. So you remove it as soon as it can when it's in a young stage versus at a very large stage is quite the trick to do it. Additionally, we also use compost from our horticulture facility. In the past, you know, and when I was young, when we use it for our garden beds, it was full of plastic, full of bad stuff. But now they have a new combine unit where they kind of separate all the bad stuff and they actually let it sit for longer now. So that kind of kills off, heat treats the seeds that could be in there. But then we also top the soil with a layer of chippings, and that seems to have so far been successful. But the Microforest project is a huge experiment, right? So far, we are seeing tremendous success, but that could all be a flip of a coin. You know, we can have a hurricane come in, knock down majority of our plants, and then those invasives to then take root again, right? So it's a matter of continuously maintaining what we have and monitoring to see some of our invasive pressures before they become a bigger issue.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Trevor. I mean, your determination is remarkable, and it really is, as Sarah said, it really is inspirational. So congratulations and keep going.
Thank you, Colin.
Thanks again, Colin. Good to see you.
And you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, I think I will email you my questions just so we can wrap up. Not too late because I've got like 7. And I'm sure Colin will also be emailing you a list of questions. Yep.
Yes,
Well, sorry, go ahead, Nick.
No, it says yes, please. Put our contact information on the end of the presentation. I could go back as well if anyone wants those QR codes real quickly.
I've got it right there. It's also on the yep, perfect. Thank you, Nick. It's also on the flyer when everyone registered. And I will, when I send the email with the recording, I'll include the email addresses as well in case anyone has any last minute questions, or not last minute, but questions later on. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Nick, so much. I appreciate you taking the time to give us this presentation today. It's been a long time coming, so I'm excited that we got to do it. Thank you as well to Mariana, our translator, for providing this presentation in Spanish. I speak Spanish, and there's no way that I could do a live translation. It would not, I don't know how you do it, so thank you. And thank you for everyone that attended and participated in today's Tech Talk. I will see you guys at the next one in a few months. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for attending
Thanks,
as well.
Lena.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lena, so
you.
much.
Thanks, Trevor. Cheerio.
Pleasure, everyone. Till next time.